But we've been meeting for almost 12 months.
Yep.
I know.
So,
It's been lovely getting to know you, but I wish that, we could be talking about
thanks.
how things are moving in the right direction. And, you know, I wanted to bring up a line out of the movie No Other Land. I watched it, I streamed it, I cried. It was brutally horrendous. And the Palestinian boy, whose name has just Basil, I was just about to say,
Brasilia.
yeah, Basil. Um,
Basil.
Basil. He
Yeah.
said to
Right.
Yuval, if I'm saying it correctly, he said, Yuval, you're so impatient. You think you're just going to come here for 10 days and the occupation will be over. The occupation has been here before us, but we have to be patient. We have to be patient. You can't come here and dissolve it in 10 days' time. And I felt like he was talking to me.
Yeah.
So
Um,
sad.
think that they can be done with it, just with a brief struggle, that's fine. But there's also another layer here is that some of the people who are trying to sort of solve the whole thing may not be aware of all the underlying problems here, the full scope of colonialism, settler colonialism. And I'm not blaming Yuval specifically. I mean, I have some disagreements with him, but he's better than most so-called liberal Zionists here. But in general, there's this notion of, it's just the 67 occupation, a few settlements that needs to be dismantled. Let's get this done. And it doesn't work. I mean, and I've also seen burnout among activists, including Israeli activists, who had good intentions, but were perhaps not quite mindful of the scope of the problem. People who were very dedicated to causes on the ground in the West Bank, but experienced burnout after several years of hard, tough activism.
Yeah. And feeling like things are just getting worse, maybe not better. And, you know, maybe their burnout is temporary and they will eventually return to it and it will be like this for the rest of their life, burning out, pausing, returning, and so on.
Many are
Or,
just given up. I mean, they're no longer active.
yeah,
There are people who are taking a break and then coming
yes.
back, but sort of regrouping. But some
Some
people
just
just
completely
fed up with
cannot.
it.
And, there are some days where I feel like that too. It's so soul destroying. Just feels like you're in a dark hole and you're never going to see any light. It's really
So yeah,
hard.
yeah. So I mean, so in some ways it does feel like nothing is changing, but then again, I mean, you have to look. I mean, there's only sort of a final number of key parameters or elements which keep the whole thing going. Israel's genocidal settler colonial apartheid system,
Yeah.
and if you can change some of these parameters, then things really open up, and you can change reality here.
Mm.
And I mean, of course, the main thing is Western support for Israel, and it's still strong. But I think it's a major change when you see ICC, International Criminal Court, arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials. And there are things that seem possible and plausible right now scenarios for the Palestine solidarity movement,
Yeah.
which were not on the agenda several years ago. So I would say that some strategic progress is being made, but of course, I mean, reality on the ground is horrific.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, what's great is that you have got this a different lens because you have been involved for so much longer than a lot of people. And so you're able to actually see the successes or the accomplishments that many people that have just come in on the scene since October the 7th don't have that ability to see how it is actually improving. So it's wonderful to speak to people like you that can actually shed light and positivity and give us some hope that it is actually moving in the right direction and we cannot give up. We need to see it through.
yeah, yeah, and more specifically, I think that a lot of the backlash that we're seeing right now in the West, in America, McCarthyism,
Mm,
in America for sure, also in Australia, has to do with fear, on the part of the pro-Israel Zionist establishment, who are seeing real progress in terms of Palestine solidarity, especially among the young generation,
yes.
being afraid of TikTok. We know that the major motivation behind the attempt to ban TikTok in the US had to do with the fact that there was a surge of Palestine solidarity and criticism of Israel's genocide in Gaza among young people after October 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And major pro-Israel Zionist institutions are panicking about this.
Yes.
So we have some specific indications of progress.
Mm. This is the maybe the largest the movement has ever been in the 75 to 80 years that people have been fighting to free Palestine.
Yeah, I think so. Decades ago it was inconceivable. At least I know something about the United States. I think that in Australia it was probably still is even more conservative and pro-Israel.
Mm,
To have huge solidarity vigils with Palestinians, and even anti-Zionist Jews decades ago were a small minority within their communities. So there were no, or I mean, fewer McCarthyist attacks on them, but now. We're also seeing it among young Jews in the US, and this is encouraging. And then we see, the Anti-Defamation League, the so-called Anti-Defamation League, which is just, nowadays they don't really focus on anti-Semitism. They focus on being pro-apartheid Israel, organizing these huge campaigns and trying to smear critics of Israeli atrocities as anti-Semites. So I think that the other side here is definitely seeing uh, um, the progress being made by the movement. And I would also note the legislation by I think by now it's pretty much half of states, American states within the Union, the United States, banning BDS or in some ways, I mean, inflicting all kinds of penalties on people who support BDS. Another indication of fear. And now, of course, with the arrest of that student Mahmoud Khalil
mm,
in New York, Columbia University, um, that's another escalation. And ironically or not, things are some of the repression, the persecution against the movement is now so severe that it's also creating precedents for the persecution of other movements and causes in the West, definitely in the United States. I mean, if the Trump administration can just arbitrarily arrest and deport or attempt to deport someone for protected free speech, with a green card,
Yeah.
the green card holder, they're likely to try to do that, to ecological movements, activists protesting the climate crisis policy or lack thereof, and Black Lives Matter.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, it's becoming a huge issue up to the point that it's definitely eroding basic civil liberties within the West. And of course, overall, I'm not trying to praise the West. The West means a history of colonialism and genocide, and nowadays support for Israel's genocide. But one distinction here has been that in the West, I mean, those who live in these Western countries, they're fairly protected. They have an array of civil and human rights granted to them,
Hmm.
protected free speech, and this backlash against the Palestine solidarity movement is also amounts to an attack on civil liberties of people who are trying to voice their concerns on other issues. It's creating dangerous precedents.
Very much so. Um, it's almost unprecedented what is happening in terms of the draconian dictatorships that the West is leaning towards. It's quite remarkable the lengths they will go to protect um, the Zionist movement or the Zionist structure.
And I would also add that I mean, there's also this sort of recurring theme about everything orchestrated by Jewish Zionist supporters of Israel.
Mm.
I would say that even though, I mean, there is an Israel lobby in the form of AIPAC that is pushing for this, especially the Anti-Defamation League for these measures. I mean, it's very clear that non-Jewish Western elites, predominantly white folks, are on
Yes.
board with Israel's policies. I mean, they see Israel as a sort of strategic ally in the Middle East, and they support Israel for various reasons.
Very much so, Ofer.